Shimmer Hula Dunya. How is everybody? Falchagoo, the best of Olde Scot podcast. Halmia Dolian Krista. That means I'm going down to the vault. Catch a velu on videos. Where are you, videos? Here comes the best of the Olde Scot podcast. Enjoy. I found it. Shimorak. This is a lively tune. It's a song about a boisterous wedding at which a lady called Morak was the lucky bride. Several women are named in the song, but no men are. This is a popular type of Gaidhlig song called Porchabale, meaning a tune by the mouth or from the mouth, or mouth music. This type of song is often light-hearted, occasionally bawdy in nature, and always the hit of any Gaidhlig or wedding. Hope you like learning Shimorak. And remember, Gaidhlig at the top, English at the bottom. Enjoy.
Morak, Shimorak, Shimorak, Rain vanish, Morak, Shimorak, Rain vanish, Anam. Morak, Shimorak, Shimorak, Rain vanish, Morak, Shimorak, Rain vanish, Anam. Vai dove nu ariag sahi dove blian, vai dove hullela kunik misher yauvi, vai dove nu ariag sahi dove blian, vai dove hullela kunik misher yauvi. Morak, Shimorak, Shimorak, Rain vanish, Morak, Shimorak, Rain vanish, Anam. Morak, Shimorak, Shimorak, Rain vanish, Morak, Shimorak, Rain vanish, Anam. Verderend ben het as het gelijk en jarmen, van bochelijk het baneries moet je neken, moet je namen. Verderend ben het as het gelijk en jarmen, van bochelijk het baneries moet je neken, moet je namen. Morak, Shimorak, Shimorak, Rain vanish, Morak, Shimorak, Rain vanish, Anam. Shimorak, 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 Rain vanish, Morak, Shimorak, Rain vanish, Anam. Shimorak, Rain vanish, Morak, Shimorak, Rain vanish, Anam. Shimorak, 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 Rain vanish, Morak, Shimorak, Rain vanish, Anam. Morak, Shimorak, Shimorak, Rain vanish, Morak, Shimorak, Rain vanish, Anam. Shimorak, 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 Rain vanish, Morak, Shimorak, Rain vanish, Anam.
Celtic Badass of the Week showcases a different badass person of Celtic heritage each week. Those who exemplify the give no shit attitude and come out on top. They may come from our past or our present, but rest assured they come from all walks of life and legend. They are men, women, even old ladies and pirate queens. You don't have to be a muscled up Celt in a fur kilt swinging a mighty sword. You can just be a 4'11" Welsh woman and suffragette who knows jujitsu. Most of these badasses are all too real. While some may be only legend, badass legends though. The only prerequisite for this title is Celtic blood and badassedness.
Alright, this week's Celtic badass, James the Black Douglas, the most feared knight in Scottish history. In my humble opinion, James Douglas could beat the shit out of William Wallace in a fight. Now before you scream heresy, let me bolster that admittedly extraordinary claim with equally extraordinary evidence. James Douglas, Robert the Bruce's indomitable captain during the Wars of Independence, is overshadowed only by Bruce himself as the most compelling of Scotland's 14th century personalities. Douglas is something of a duality about him in the history of the British Isles. Now, while many Scots came to know him as the good Sir James for his championing of the Bruce's cause, it was his mastery of fear as a tool of war, his personal ferocity in battle, and his brutally effective raiding style that caused people in the north of England, often subject to said raids, to bestow on him a most badass and enduring moniker, the Black Douglas. His boogeyman reputation amongst the English was such that, while he was still very much alive and active, mothers in Northumbria and Cumbria supposedly sang to their children, "Hushy, hushy, little pet ye. Hushy, hushy, do not fret ye. The Black Douglas shall not get ye." Now, of course, this would be accompanied by a chilling folk store would send caution into the children, and it's usually followed by a growling voice, maybe a father or somebody jumping out of the shadows. "Don't be so sure of that." It was just a way to put some caution into kids, keep them out of the woods, that kind of thing. Douglas led and partook in many dramatic episodes in the period between joining Bruce in 1306 and his death in 1330, including the crafty and brutal retaking of his ancestral home, Douglas Castle. Now, in 1307, at a time that Bruce's force were hiding in the Carrick Hills near Turnberry, James Douglas sought permission to launch an attack on his own property of Douglas Castle. Still at this time in the English hands, of course, accompanied by only 2 men, James made his way to his ancestral estates in Douglas Dale. Here he sought out a Thomas Dixon, a loyal tenant who would have known him as a young boy, and with Dixon's help he recruited more of the local men in order to ambush the castle garrison. Now on Palm Sunday, while the garrison were attending church services, some of Douglas's men mingled with the congregation, with others waiting outside. Now, although the attack started prematurely, Douglas was victorious, capturing or killing the entire garrison. Douglas and his men then retired to the castle, where they sat down to a meal already prepared for the garrison upon their return. Now, after taking what was useful from the castle stores, the wells were poisoned and all remaining supplies were scattered across the cellars. The remaining prisoners were brought down and beheaded, and with their bodies joining those of the already deceased comrades on a huge pile of bodies, the whole lot was then fired. I don't mean they lost their jobs. They were set on fire. Now, this episode became known as the Douglas Larder, causing the total destruction of his own castle. Basically, if he couldn't have it, no one would. Douglas, he fought alongside Robert at Bannockburn. He acted as a sub-commander connected to King Robert's own force. In the aftermath of the battle, Douglas pursued the defeated Edward II to Dunbar, with a force outnumbered by the king's 5-1, and followed so close that the English king's company dared not even stop to take water. This and other actions brought James his reputation of being more fierce than the devil in hell himself. Wow, His battle record speaks for itself. Douglas gained 57 victories to 13 losses, and those losses were mere tactical withdrawals than true routs. Now, the final and perhaps most famous episode of all came with the death of Robert the Bruce on June 7, 1329. Upon his death, Bruce assembled his captains and asked Douglas to bear his heart on crusade to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, possibly as posthumous repentance for Bruce's murder of his rival for the crown, John Comyn, at the High Kirk in Dumfries in 1306. Now, Jerusalem, however, was firmly in the hands of Mamluk Sultanate, a great Muslim leader in general, which James Douglas knew he would need a huge, much larger army to accomplish. Alternately, a cause was readily available in the form of King Alfonso XI of Castile's crusade against the Moors of Andalusia, Spain. Douglas jumped at the chance to fulfill his promise to the Bruce. So with a hand-picked group of Scottish knights, they bade their homeland farewell, promising to return Bruce's heart in a casque around his neck to Melrose Abbey upon their victory. Now, the battle ensued in the shadow of the Castillo de la Estrella, the Castle of the Stars, somewhere during the fight. A command was misinterpreted, causing the Scots to charge the Moorish lines unaided. Inevitably, they were surrounded, and with his end clearly upon him, Douglas removed the casque from around his neck, declared aloud, "Past first and fight, and thou were to want to do, and Douglas will follow thee or die." Then he charged the enemy line one last time. Damn. When the surviving Scots searched the field following the Crusaders' victory, they found Douglas dead, still holding the severed arm of his enemy, run through with 5 deep wounds. But even though this badass died using the severed arm of his enemy as a weapon, he still clung onto the casque, which remained unharmed underneath his broken body. Badass in life and even more badass in death, Douglas's flesh was boiled from his bones, as was the custom for long-distance transport of a noble badass's remains, and his heart was removed, and became a companion of that to Bruce's in the casque. This is what gives us the term Braveheart. It was never intended for Wallace. The true Braveheart is Robert the Bruce, and his steadfast friend and fellow badass, the Black Douglas. Now, in case you're not convinced, it seems Douglas was not only a master of the arts of war, but the art of a witty comeback. During the Andalusian Crusade, an English knight approached Douglas when the Scot first arrived at the Crusaders' court. By that time, Douglas's badass reputation had haunted the imaginations of warriors throughout Europe, and none could believe that this master of heart-wrenching terror was the man before them. The Englishman remarked, "He didn't even have facial scars, and everyone knows a true knight bears his scars like a badge of honor." Douglas, retaining total poise, and I'd like to imagine casually taking a bite of an apple like a cartoon villain, retorted, "Praise God, I always had strong hands to protect my head." Basically, anyone who got close enough to him to give him a scar didn't survive to tell the tale. Now, another time was the Pope himself. While laying siege to an English garrison in Berwick, Douglas received a letter from the Pope. It demanded that he cease shedding the blood of fellow Christians and abandon the siege at once. On threat of excommunication and eternal damnation, Douglas, not one for half measures or heavenly ideals, made his intent clear. His reply was a simple and defiant, "I would rather enter Berwick than paradise." Damn. Some staked their claim to history through fame and fortune. But this badass James Douglas cared not for these trappings. It was the way of the sword, aimed always at the terror-stricken hearts of his people's enemies. Dude, that's badass.
true love will never meet again on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. Oh, you'll take the high road and I'll take the low, and I'll be in Scotland afore ye. For me and my true love will never meet again on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. 'Twas there that we parted in yon shady glen, on the steep, steep sides of Lomond, where in the purple hue the Highland hills we view, and the moon coming out in the gloaming. Oh, you'll take the high road and I'll take the low, and I'll be in Scotland afore ye. For me and my true love will never meet again on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. The wee birdies sing and the wildflowers spring, and in sunshine the waters are sleeping, but the broken-hearted kens their second spring again, though the wave foamy seas fray their greeting. You'll take the high road and I'll take the low, and I'll be in Scotland afore ye. For me and my true love will never meet again on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond.
Welcome to Dark Celtic History. All right, this is a special one for the Christmas season called the Bodock. Now, during this time of the year when we expect a jolly fat man to come down our chimney and bring us gifts and presents, we should really beware. You know, I'm talking, go ahead and put one in the chamber beware, because Santa isn't the only fat man that does this kind of thing. Like in Scotland, if you hear someone coming down your chimney in Scotland, I would go and check. Do it for your children's sake, because a visit from the Bodock isn't a pleasant one. Now, a Bodock is a mythical spirit or creature, rather like the boogeyman. The word in Scottish Gaelic, old man, that's what Bodock means. Historically, it means, a mature person. It comes from the prefix bod, meaning penis, and the suffix ach, meaning someone who has a penis, basically. That's what it means. The Bodock is said to slip down the chimney much like our old jolly St. Nick, except the Bodock is there to steal or terrorize your little children. He sneaks in while your children are sleeping, and he pokes and prods and pinches and pulls at your children in an effort to generally disturb their sleep. And he's trying to get them reeling with nightmares. According to the stories of most parents, the Bodak will only bother bad or naughty children. You know, kind of like Santa has his bad and good list. Only problem is, Santa never gave me nightmares. Now, the legend of the Bodak is vague to his existence. However, it is believed to be a poltergeist or a malevolent spirit that was once very bad towards children. Kind of like a pedophile. You know, he was bad in some way or other. And this is his way of fulfilling his demented fetishes. Now, this curse on the Bodak is his torment, or punishment that Satan has imposed on him for his sins. A good defense would be to put salt in the hearth before bedtime. The Bodak will not cross salt, and if watching Supernatural has taught me anything, any being that is stopped by salt isn't a good one. Alright, so this year, check your chimneys for that Bodak and be ready for him, especially if you know you got naughty children.
Gürtelig lamar hami smocherien sasik bram Vone nur jak mi biant nart jo Glauben Nen loch ne mars nen strom Signale van atare gachlar vel min dor Vaki nabitor sacheru mit evig bahas Confere mesken loje vares buon gepraat Haniel shinjele gacher khosh Maria buon pas Svershierten nene blian schies Snacht gegrien in nacht Han halle verleer mijn hoort Jem na vi allen sus nen jor Ek ne sjelse bolle Hallir hovam lekja Kun gelaschen jach kek mag los En leef voor mij voor de woord Ach get aan door shakroyere Amos mohan jenek niklo Fake min hat jesen yachim marchok Bishines kana heglavak ines bilen bla toshfok Smayanten es bi patjegud lefan chud met vjok Aiche valat henerun nat liepi churi vla Kato sava hene hos daguske sundosla. A mission show is the trai she was nam khlosen for him vash. Gnuri fein has le boy han khopon erina.
Welcome to Dark Celtic History. The Red Dragon. This is the story of two dragons clinched in bloody battle, sharp talons ripping through scaly flesh as fire bursts forth from fang-filled jaws. One red dragon versus one white dragon in a battle for the claim to a Welsh castle. Wales is synonymous with the Red Dragon. Just look at their flag. You'll see who the Welsh were cheering for. But not many people actually know where the legend of the Red Dragon comes from. In the 5th century, during a time of great turmoil with Britain, the Romans had left a great void, and Celtic tribes vied for control and power. The Celtic king, Vortigern, decided that he quite fancied building a castle on the lofty mountain of Dinas Emrys in Wales to show off his might and prestige. Every day his men would tirelessly work to build the towers, but every morning they'd arrive on site to find their hard work reduced to rubble. The king sought the advice of a young but accomplished druid named Merlin. Now Merlin revealed that beneath the castle's proposed site was a hidden lake. It was home to two dragons, and the king would have to deal with these two mighty beasts before he could build his castle. The king demanded that the lake be uncovered and drained. His men turned their efforts to that cause, and once it was, the two dragons, one red representing the Welsh and one white representing the English, started to fight. You see, these two great dragons had been in a pitched battle eons ago for the right to call this land theirs. But the fight dragged on for centuries, and an ancient druid who feared the two mighty beasts would destroy the land before either won the fight cast a spell on them that trapped them within the very thing they both desired. It would be man who would decide who would get this land, but it seemed man was equally as determined to fight and unwillingly destroy what they also wanted. The red dragon, who was equally tired of this battle and only wanted to live in peace, threw his entire efforts into the fight and emerged triumphant over the white dragon, who was banished to the lands in the east. Vortigern's castle was finally built and duly named Dinas Emrys, which means the city of Emrys in Welsh, in honor of Midrin Emrys, Merlin's city. And the red dragon has been celebrated and had been an iconic symbol of Wales ever since.
Firavata. It's a very traditional Gaelic song. It is the song of unrequited love for a young fisherman. There are many versions of the song, but this version says it was written at the end of the 18th century by Sinead Nick Finlay from Tong on the Isle of Lewis for Donald McCrae of Uick on the Isle of Lewis as well. He is the boatman that she laments so much for, and while this song is full of despair, in reality the couple ended up marrying a year after the song was written. Songs, in general, tend to exaggerate words and sounds to fit the song to the music, and Gaelic music is no exception. So look out for some of the words that are just nonsense words that sound good and make the song work. So enjoy learning the song Firavata.
Celtic Badass of the Week showcases a different badass person of Celtic heritage each week. Those who exemplify the give no shit attitude and come out on top. They may come from our past or our present, but rest assured they come from all walks of life and legend. They are men, women, even old ladies and pirate queens. You don't have to be a muscled-up Celt in a fur kilt swinging a mighty sword. You can just be a 4'11" Welsh woman and suffragette who knows jujitsu. Most of these badasses are all too real. While some may be only legend, badass legends though. The only prerequisite for this title is Celtic blood and badassedness. Jean de Clisson. There had been black ships on the horizon, 3 of them almost mystically appearing through the thick fog on the English Channel like ghosts emerging from the veil of death itself. Crimson sails, red as blood, propelled them terrifyingly through the water with an inescapable speed. The Baron's men had done what they could. Archers launched fire arrows. Armored marines came to grapples with sword, spear, and axe. But in the end, the ferocity of the terrifying pirate fleet was too much. They were overrun in minutes, and she came, the pirate queen from hell, calmly striding along the deck, dragging a fearsome, well-worn axe behind her. She picked out the leader. Her men pushed him down to the deck, and she lopped off the man's head like she was preparing a pineapple for a badass pirate pina colada. Now it was a cold, gray, rain-soaked day towards the end of the year 1346, when the heavy wood and iron doors of the Lord's Keep were slammed open with a jarring amount of force. A pair of guards quickly escorted 2 badly wounded Frenchmen out of the rain into the darkly lit gray hall, hurrying them forward with a sense of urgency. The men were pitiful to see, stripped of their weapons, armor, and uniform insignia, and bleeding from cuts and bruises across their bodies. Their eyes held the gaze of men who had witnessed untold horrors. Without even beginning to know how the hell to process their reality, with a heavy sigh and the urging of the Baron, the 2 exhausted French sailors began relating their horrifying story. She picked out these 2 Frenchmen by hand, pointing to them seemingly at random. Her men immediately went to work decapitating every other surviving member of the crew. Before heading down below decks to check the hold for treasure and plunder, the pirate queen looked both survivors in the eye with a cold, hateful stare. You have been left alive, she said, to tell your king that La Tigresse Bretonne has claimed another of his ships. Congreve was right. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. King Philip the Fortunate probably would have been wise to consider that before illegally arresting and executing Lady Jean de Clisson's husband, confiscating her land and declaring her an outlaw to the French crown. Jean-Louise de Belleville was born in the year 1300, the daughter of a noble family from Brittany, which is that little pointy peninsula on the northwest tip of France. It's also a Celtic nation. Now, at the ripe old age of 12, she was married off to a 19-year-old French nobleman named Geoffrey, and went off to live in his awesome manor. They had 2 kids together, but he died in 1326, and 4 years later, Jean was married again. This time to a dashing, handsome, super-rich French nobleman named Oliver III de Clisson. Wow. By all accounts, Oliver and Jean were truly in love. Plus, this guy had an awesome castle outside Nantes that overlooked a scenic river, which is kind of cool. The Lord and Lady Clisson were obviously pretty happy in their Brittany villa because they had 5 kids. Didn't end up having to butcher anyone with an axe, and don't really do anything historically notable between 1326 and 1343. Their castle still stands to this day, and I don't know, I wouldn't mind spending a summer here. Fortunately, life in paradise came crashing down to an abrupt and pretty quickly 100 Years' War broke out between England and France in 1337. And even if you don't know anything about the 100 Years' War, you can probably use context, clues, and the powers of deduction to figure out that it lasted about 100 years. So it's probably pretty safe to say that it was a fairly horrific and intense situation for both sides. At its core, the 100 Years' War was a stupid argument over who should be the King of France after the old King of France died without leaving an heir. Well, Lord Oliver III of Clisson sided with the King Philip the Fortunate of France at first, signing on as a badass knight and leading a cavalry attack against the English invaders. But King Edward of England used the power of persuasion and probably a ton of gold to convince Oliver that, yeah, maybe we should side with England instead. Oliver stopped sending troops to Philip the Fortunate. Philip got mad and had his guards arrest Oliver while the Lord of Clisson was attending a jousting tournament in Nantes. Philip and a small group of nobles declared him a traitor to the crown, hung him, then cut off his head and hung it on the walls of Nantes. Then Philip wrote up a decree that Joan was a traitor like her husband, and he ordered her to be arrested and have all their property seized and confiscated. When Lady Clisson received word of her husband's death, the 43-year-old widow didn't break down. She didn't weep uncontrollably. She didn't pop a Xanax and listen to sad songs. She grabbed her axe, a suit of armor, ordered her chamberlain to sell every valuable thing she had, packed her 7 kids up in a ship, and sailed it right to the gates of Nantes. When she got there, she had her kids come out and see her father's head mounted on the walls of the city. Now, do not forget this, she said. Do not ever forgive this. Seek vengeance at all costs. I don't know what background music was playing while this happened, but I bet it was epic. Now, Joan de Clisson sold all of her land, jewels, worldly possessions, and used the money to buy 3 massive warships. She painted them black, outfitted them with blood-red sails, hired crews of bloodthirsty marauders, and used the extra cash to bribe the lords of Brittany not to sell her out to the king. Then she went to work. It's uncertain how long the Tigress of Brittany, aka the Lioness of Brittany, marauded, pillaged, raped, murdered, decapitated, and otherwise horrifically massacred every French vessel in the Channel. Estimates range anywhere from 5 months to 2 years. Now, it doesn't matter. Consider that Blackbeard's entire career in piracy lasted for less than 2 years. And you realize that a pirate armada can do a hell of a lot of damage in a very short amount of time. Now, her mission was simple: attack anything with a French flag. They took the head of her lover, so now she was going to rain down so many decapitated heads that they'd wish they'd never heard of an executioner's axe. She personally whacked the commander and any nobleman on board, chopping off their heads and throwing the bodies overboard. Now, her crew would kill any other survivors, but they would always leave 2 men alive to tell King Philip the Fortunate just what had happened. Now, to make shit even worse for him, Philip the Fortunate couldn't do much to stop this raiding fleet because most of the French fleet had been annihilated by the English at the Battle of Sluys in 1340. And in 1343, he couldn't exactly spare the troops, money, or supplies that would be necessary for an expedition to chase a trio of pirate ships all around the western coast of France. Now, it wasn't long before the Black Fleet's reign of destruction caught the eye of King Edward of England. Now, old Ed, he was super into the fact that Joan didn't attack English ships, so he actually ended up granting her land, titles, and money to thank her for her help clearing the channel of the enemy. She repaid his debt by ferrying supplies, men, and arrows from England to France to help support the English during the Battle of Crécy. Now, we all know how most pirate stories end, with our hero swinging from the end of a noose. But Jeanne de Clisson's doesn't go down that way. Instead of finally paying the price for her terrifying killing spree, she actually marries an English lord in 1349, settles down in a sweet castle somewhere on the coast of Brittany, outlives Philip the Fortunate, and dies peacefully around 1359. Her son Oliver IV inherited her estate. He was a charming boy, took after his mother, and is known to history as Oliver the Butcher for his badass attitude on the battlefield. Now, Oliver eventually retook the castle that had once belonged to his mother and father, and as I said, the building still stands today. The French resistance even used it as a fortress to fight the Nazis during World War II, which is pretty badass. It is said that the spirits of the tortured lovers are said to haunt the ruins of the castle to this day. She's badass even in the afterlife. Alright.
The Callanish Stones on Lewis. Now, a local legend relates how the stone ring of Callanish was found many hundreds of years ago by a farmer looking for large rocks to build a wall. As he dug deeper into the earth, other stones began to appear until finally he had brought to light the ancient ring of Callanish. Archaeological excavation at the site has determined an original construction period as early as 3400 BC, and paleoclimatology studies have shown that the ring's use as an astronomical observation device may have ended sometime around 1500 BC. The site at Callanish was abandoned after that and became overgrown with peat moss. Now, while the stones are prominent and visually striking objects, they are only one part of a large cluster of some 20 megalithic ruins within a 2-mile radius. The ring itself seems to have originally been set at the center of a cross-shaped arrangement of standing stones, approached by an avenue of stones 270 feet long, of which only 9 remain standing. As it now exists, the ring is composed of 13 stones, the tallest being 15.5 feet tall. Now, according to interpretations, the Ring of Callanish, like many other similar structures in Europe, astronomical observation function, and a sacred temple function. The stones were used to track the rising and falling of celestial bodies in order to predict in advance the occurrence of the seasons, astronomical events, and prophecies. Exactly how and why the prehistoric builders used the rings, we may never really know. Yet, a hint is perhaps offered by an old legend which states Callanish to be an auspicious place to consummate a marriage, as the gods in the heavens above would bless the union.
Saveltje aan brein vaskek voor nachlikas jach pian and pian and
Piping pigs, strange games, an island with no cats, the plague of bingo and wild animals ravaging the land, strange phenomena, and more on Weird Scotland. A wand never lay down. In 1597, an Aberdeenshire woman, Ellen Gray, was accused of using sorcery, witchcraft, and working her charms on a farm worker named Thomas Reddock. So that his wand never lay down, meaning that he basically always had an erection. It was undetermined if she worked her charm on him for her benefit or to actually hurt Thomas. His condition was a source of embarrassment for Thomas, of course. This limited his time out in the community, and he was a pretty social dude. And he ended up getting him shunned from Sunday worship services, too. Eventually, Thomas died, reportedly from his condition. Ellen Gray was never accused of being an actual witch or for Thomas's death. Most thought this was because those with the power to do so were worried they would receive the same treatment. Ew.
Get a me gan huri kakam school.